So how in the world did we get here? Well, and what's our strategy? Well, there's always plan A. And then there's plan B. You know, maybe it'll just go away. Or there's plan C. You can jump ship. But let's take a look at plan D. Did you know that there's a strategy if you ever confront a bear? First, you talk loud. They'll hear you coming and disappear before you get too close. And if you think you're done for, you can wrap yourself up like a little ball and just play dead. But if a bear charges you, you can outsmart that bear by running downhill if possible. You see, a bear's hind legs are shorter and they'll have a harder time catching up to you. And then finally, know where you're going and never go alone. Perhaps there's some wisdom and truth in this strategy. And we all know that the best defense is a good offense. And that's what we have to have in this battle. And this is one giant bear. And he's coming at us from both the left and the right. And it makes us all feel very small in this big picture. It's going to take people who have real courage. Those of us who have been battling on the front lines all these years well understand how this is truly a David and Goliath kind of a battle. But you know, David won it with 5 smooth stones. I've been told never to overwhelm an audience with more than 5 action plans. So I guess David got it right. Well, here's our 5. First, they are to go out there on the websites that you'll be given. Second, of course, contact our elected officials. And we have to give them specific goals, specific actions that they can take. I'm going to share with you what those policy action plans are. And then we can all spread the word with our neighbors and friends. Hold gatherings at your homes. Share these videos with them. I think I speak for all of us when we say that we're a band of researchers that do this on our own dollars, and we don't have a whole lot of big money like those that we are up against. Now, let's look at who is our audience. Well, just about everybody. We need to get this information out to activists, to our elected officials, to neighbors, family, our friends, teachers, every school classroom, our churches, Americans who care about their children's future. I've mentioned that we have organized an education policy action plan. It's a comprehensive plan that has, well, more than 5 options, but then again, I don't want to overwhelm anybody in this. So here's what I would ask. If we are going to restore local control and our representative form of government, we're offering a group of some action plans here that you can personally prioritize and maybe choose 1 or 2 that you would like to work on. So take notes. Education on this issue is the most important priority that we can do. So here's our set of goals. The first group is at the federal level. So the first group is at the federal level. Action number 1, phase out and defund federal control of education, setting a reasonable timeline to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education and leave only an oversight monitoring office of 1 elected official from each state as a check and a balance on government activities related to data collection and other activities formerly carried out by the U.S. Department of Education. Number 2, challenge and discontinue the unconstitutional and illegal administration of behavioral national tests and assessments. The General Education Provision Act prohibits national testing, but NAEP, the National Assessment for education progress is just one example. Number 3, pursue an antitrust and/or a class action lawsuit against the College Board. The College Board is a private enterprise that receives massive public funding. We need to break up that monopoly. Number 4, end the federal funding of regional labs. These labs are removing local control and regionalizing. They are the outsourcing excuse that the Department of Education uses to exclude themselves from really disobeying their own laws. They are outsourcing the curriculum development for all of the schools all over the country, and it removes our local control. Action number 5, stop and phase out further funding through ESEA reauthorizations. Because Title I funding bypasses the state and local control, has been lost to federal overreach, and the purpose of education has been changed to government-managed workforce tracking instead of real education, we must restore those pre-1965 policies. Number 6, prohibit collection of private personal data. Help bring a lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Education for illegal access to student records without informed consent under the U.S. FERPA law, which is the privacy law. Recent NSA disclosures illustrate the need for strengthening these privacy laws, not weakening them. Data mining and sharing should be prohibited beyond the local school and only released upon request for application either to another school or for college application and entrance. Action number 7, phase out block grants. Regardless of the source, here's how a block grant works. A taxpayer sends, say, $1 to Washington, only to get back perhaps 80, 85 cents or less, so that control and redistribution are federally controlled and then used against us. That makes no sense. Action number 8, discontinue further voucher, school choice, charter school, also called P3, public-private partnerships, and privatization grants. These constitute taxation without representation, especially at the local level. Action number 9, phase out the practice of tax-funded research grants and student loans. These are also P3 vouchers to private colleges and universities, binding those schools to federal regulations. Why would a private college want to do that? This is the loss of religious liberty and the socialization of our higher education system. Action number 10, end the computer adaptive test, the CAT, which employs behavioral strategies to change attitudes and values. Action 11, require partisan school board and superintendent elections. In the state of Utah, for example, which is a strong Republican state, it's estimated that the vast majority of most school boards, state and district, vote progressively in their funding and education policies. No regular or charter school board or superintendent should be appointed or selected by any other means except an election by the very taxpayers that are funding those schools. And this would also include schemes such as pre-selected candidates by commissions who are then approved by a governor, and then the taxpayers get to select whoever they decide are the two best to go up against each other. All right, now let's look at Action 12. Tie the funding to the geographical tax base where the school physically resides in order to restore the neighborhood school and the accountability. This is the definition of local control. It is the definition of taxation with representation. You see, charter schools and community councils violate the very definition of local control and representation. This is the definition of taxation with representation, and anything other than that must be repealed. Action 13, end federal funding of state schools by restoring local control to the lands that those states rightfully own. Now, this is different for every state. Some states, as you can see on this map, are owned more by the federal government than others. And if you will note, most of the states west of the Mississippi are almost entirely owned, managed, and controlled by the federal government. What that does is it removes otherwise taxable property that those states could use for their own revenue, which would bring that control back to the local state. Action 14, repeal consolidation legislation that is merging the smaller schools into larger districts. Action 15, prohibit local teacher, administrator unions, and parent organizations from forcing participation and using dues for political purposes. Action 16, phase out vouchers or anything like them. The definition is the funds that follow the student. Any that mingle public funds with the private sector and that result in taxation without representation. Action 17, phase out open enrollment and school choice charter schools in 2 phases. First, by ending additional charters, and then by developing a transition plan under which current charters can take responsibility for their own development by a certain cutoff date and or go out of business. The intended consequence is authentic parental choices, which are public, private, or homeschool, and local control and religious liberty in education, and the restoration of representative government. Our liberty is the bottom line. School choice is a lie. It is killing authentic choice. Private and parochial schools cannot compete with free charters, and they are closing or they are secularizing to become a publicly funded charter. Action 18. On an individual level, here are some options that you might consider. Remove your children from schools that receive public subsidies, including public-private partnership schools, also known as school choice, charter, and voucher schools. Action 19, have confidence that it is possible to teach a child the basics at home. And if you don't have the confidence, for a lot less, you can hire a tutor that you personally trust to help out. Action 20, teach your children correct principles and forewarn them. Students must know that when they enter a college or university that takes federal money, they will be taught ideals that your family or religious beliefs may not support, increasing the chances that they may graduate with a more socialist or secular humanist view. Action 21, avoid sending your children to private colleges and universities that accept public tax dollars. That's a difficult one because there aren't many left. But let those colleges and universities know your feelings about this and help educate them as well. And finally, Action 22, have the courage to educate and inform the business and church community one-on-one. They need to understand these critical issues as well as friends and family. It's so easy to blame others, but I would also ask all of us to reflect on what we are doing in our own homes and families. Often elected officials blame the teacher for all the problems. As a former teacher, I know how difficult it is to teach a child who is going through a personal, family, or health crisis. What's not being taken into account is the breakdown in the fabric of society within the family. A wise man once said, "No success can compensate for failure in the home." And that means not even the school system. The Italian Marxist dissident Antonio Gramsci also drafted an action plan. He wrote it from a fascist jail cell. He said that the hegemony, the dominant culture, could be weakened through education and the media. Today, our rule of law that was created to keep people free is truly hanging by a very thin thread. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, a Soviet critic and survivor of the Gulag concentration camps, in a famous speech at Harvard in 1978, commented on his observations of Americans and its media, saying that it creates trends and fashions. And he left us with a warning. He said, "In keeping silent about evil, in burying it so deep within us that no sign of it appears on the surface, we are implanting it. And it will rise up 1,000-fold in the future. When we neither punish nor reproach evildoers, we are not simply protecting their trivial old age. We are thereby ripping the foundations of justice from beneath new generations." Parents and grandparents, we cannot fail these children. They are the future, and they are the reason why. If not us, who? If not now, when?